Hello everyone, today we're going to be talking about FICA tax refunds, and this video is coming out of a conversation I had yesterday with one of our clients that's a doctor. They were working for one hospital for most of the year as a W-2, and then they accepted a new position with another hospital. And for these higher wage W-2 earners, the issue they run into when they switch employers is they might have already met the $160,000 FICA cap, which is where they stop withholding the Social Security piece of FICA. But then as soon as they switch over to the new employer, that new employer is once again going to start withholding the full FICA because they didn't know you already hit the cap. So then the question becomes, well, how do I get that money back? When do I get that money back? Is there any way to proactively to stop that from happening? Let me start out by explaining how the FICA tax works and how it's calculated. So when you look at your paycheck, you're going to see a FICA line, and that's the tax that goes towards both Social Security and Medicare. You pay half of it, and your employer pays the other half. So the employee's half is 7.65% of your gross wages. And of that 7.65%, 6.2% of it goes towards Social Security, and 1.45% goes towards Medicare. Now, the main difference between those two deductions is the Medicare, the 1.45%, has no comp limit. You get assessed that on all of your wages. But the Social Security, the 6.2% that goes towards the Social Security system, that's the one that has that limit, which is called the taxable wage base, which in 2023 is $160,200. Any wages below that $160,200 gets assessed the full FICA, 7.65%. Any wages above that threshold only get assessed the 1.45% for Medicare. Because of this $160,000 cap for employees that work W-2 for 2 or 3 separate companies simultaneously or switch jobs during the year, this can create this FICA overage situation, which I'm going to explain in an example. So in this example, let's say Sue is a doctor that's employed by XYZ Hospital, and she earns $150,000 between January and August. Then Sue accepts a new position with ABC Hospital and earns $100,000 between September and December. Both XYZ Hospital and ABC Hospital will withhold the full 7.65% in FICA tax from Sue's paycheck because she was below the taxable wage base of $160,200 with each employer. But Sue is only required to pay the 6.2% Social Security portion of the FICA tax up to that $160,200 in wages. So she's paid too much in FICA for that year. So if you look at a breakdown, XYZ Hospital's Social Security portion of FICA is 6.2% times $150,000 worth of comp. That's $9,300. And then ABC Hospital Social Security portion of FICA 6.2% times her $100,000 over there, that equaled $6,200. That means total for the year she paid in $15,500. But when you aggregate her W-2 together, the Social Security 6.2% times the taxable wage base for Sue, which is $160,200, only equals $9,932. So Sue is actually over withheld her FICA by $5,568 for the year. The question then becomes, how does Sue get that money back? So it's not automatic. There is action that needs to be taken to request these FICA tax refunds. So in a lot of cases, employees will be aware of this before they even file their taxes for the year. So if this is happening in 2023 and you know you're going to have this FICA overage, you can let your accountant know, and on the 1040, they can actually make the adjustments before your taxes are even filed. And that excess FICA tax is actually treated as if it's excess federal tax withholding. So it can be applied towards any tax liability that might be due. However, if you discover after your taxes have been filed that you have this FICA over withholding, then you can file IRS Form 843, which is a very simple, straightforward form to request that excess FICA tax refund. From what I've been told, it takes about 3 or 4 months from the time you file it before the refund shows up. That's the refund request process for people that have multiple employers. I'm told there are situations where you could have a single employer and have one of these excess FICA withholdings, maybe through a payroll deduction error. I'm guessing they're rare, but if they do happen, there's a slightly different process you have to go through. The IRS, in the case of a person with a single employer having a FICA overage, they require you to first try and resolve the FICA overage with your employer before then going to the IRS to request the FICA tax refund, which then can be that 843 form. Now we'll look at the last scenario, which are the self-employed individuals. So it's becoming more common that people have a full-time W-2 gig, and they also have this self-employment gig on the side that they're earning income from. Now, when you're self-employed, you pay both sides of the FICA tax. When we talk about that Social Security 6.2, you pay it as the employee 6.2, and then you also pay it as the employer 6.2. So you got both sides of that. But with most self-employed individuals that are sole proprietors, partners, they don't have wages. So what they normally do is they have to remit estimated taxes 4 times a year, which includes both their estimated income tax liability as well as their FICA liability as a self-employed individual. Correcting these FICA overages for self-employed individuals is a little bit easier because at the end of the day, you have to rec out all of your self-employment income tax liabilities, FICA, all that stuff. So if there's usually any type of FICA overage, it can be used as that kind of federal tax liability offset on the self-employment side. So a really good question came up on that call with that doctor client that I had that switched hospitals, which is if they already know that they had W-2 wages well above that $160,000 taxable wage base threshold, can they just tell their new employer, hey, I'm good. I've already hit the threshold, so don't withhold that extra 6.2% because I'm just going to have to request it back at the end of the year. And unfortunately, the answer is no. Employers are independent of each other. There's no way for that new employer to have any idea what your wages were with the old employer. So each employer has to continue to withhold that full FICA up to that $160,200 wage base in 2023. That then prompted me to ask an additional question to the accountants, which is if the employee is getting this 6.2% refund back, does the employer, which also paid in their 6.2, get any of that money back in the scenario of a FICA overage? And the answer from the accountants was no. The employer never gets a refund of the FICA on that first $160,000 up to that taxable wage-based amount. So if you had an employee that, let's say, worked for 10 different employers and had a W-2 of $100,000 at each one of them, so they made $1 million, they would be due a huge FICA refund the next year because they're well above that $160,000 taxable wage base where that Social Security portion stops. But the employer, the government keeps all of it. They don't get to take any of it back because they have to assess it on all their employees up to $160,000. If you're an employee watching this and you realize, oh gosh, 2 years ago I had this happen, or this has been happening for the past number of years and I've never recouped that FICA tax, the statute of limitations is 3 years. They allow you to go back 3 years to recoup that money by doing the proper filings. I hope this information was helpful. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me at moneysmartboard.com. Thank you.